So you've spent weeks knitting on a fabulous piece, you block it and you realise the sleeves are too long, or the body is too short, or something is wrong, or you find a little mistake that you cannot get past and you are faced with the decision of reknitting the entire thing or committing sweater surgery. That is what I'm going to show you today. The long saga of my wanderer pullover that I knit for my partner. My partner is a tall person, but I still grossly overestimated the length of the sleeves. I knit the sleeves as far as I thought that they would have to go, and then I blocked them, and they turned out to be far too long. And you can see that on one of these sleeves, I have already taken out 32 rows of length, and on the other one, there is still quite a lot to go. I'm going to be placing 2 lifelines and then unravel whatever is between them, and then kitchener stitching, sewing them back together, hopefully without it being noticeable afterwards. Because on this first sleeve, right there, is where I sewed it together. And I don't think you can really tell that this wasn't originally how long it was supposed to be. A little bit about this sweater. This is knitted in 100% wool, so it does felt together a bit. This has just been blocked, it hasn't been worn, so the fibres have had a little chance to grip into each other, but it hasn't really felted into each other quite as heavily. If this were a sweater that had had more wear, that could have affected how well this actually unravels. But for this, I am fairly confident that I will get a neat unravel. This is knit from the bottom up into a raglan seam. If this had been a sewn-in sleeve, I could have unpicked the sewn-in edge and just unravel and attach it to the shoulder again. But for this portion, if I were to unravel to get this sleeve free, I would have to unravel all of the yoke to reach this portion of the sleeve, and this is what needs to go. So let's go top down and I will show you my plan. So this sleeve, I started with a cuff and then I increased evenly up until about this point. From there on out, it's the same number of stitches around for the rest of the arm. So it's 110 stitches around for this piece. So I had my partner try it on with the very long sleeves. I placed the stitch marker where he wanted it to fall, and then I counted the number of rows down until the cuff. That was on the other sleeve, and it ended up being 32 rows, so I think about this long. Then I went back and placed a lifeline a few rows beneath the colour work where that starts, because I do not want to mess with that. I want a few rows of buffer in case I mess up the pickup stitches or something goes wrong. I want a little bit of a buffer. And then I'm going to count 32 rows down and place another lifeline right here. For this, I'm going to use a circular needle, which is 0.5 millimeter smaller than what I knit this with. So this was a 4mm needle and this is a 3.5, and I'm going to use one of these spare cords. They are plastic cords with a little hole in the middle, plastic tube, which can be placed on top of a needle tip and transferring the stitches to this cord, so you get your needles back. So in order to commit to sweater surgery, you have to know the anatomy of your stitches. You can see this is the right side of my work, all knit stitches. They are sorted in columns, and the columns consist of little V's. These V's are the legs of the stitch. The stitch is read from right to left, and the front leg is therefore the rightmost leg. This. Then if I want to get the next stitch, that would be this leg. And if I want to pick up another stitch, you see all of the stitch legs sort of leaning diagonally in the same direction. If I were to pick up the left leg of the stitch, you would immediately see that that leg leans the other way. So make sure to pick up all of your stitches in the same leg. Doing this prevents twisted stitches in the next step where we start sewing things together. So pick up all of your stitches on through the right leg of your stitch. So I'm going to do the same thing, starting at the bottom of the sleeve, because this is where my beginning of round will be. So I will go down a few rows, find a V that looks clear, and start picking up stitches. This is quite important to do while you are stationary. No car, no train, because you need to be able to see your stitches and you need to be able to pick them up fully, because otherwise you are going to. And you need to keep track of the row you're on so you don't accidentally move down a row and pick up a stitch from a row beneath, or move up a row where you're not supposed to be either. So far, none of the stitches are live, so if you're not happy with how you picked up a stitch or how it's looking, you can always go back and redo this portion, because none of this is permanent or can do anything. If I don't like this, I can just yank on the needle and all of my stitches will look just like they did a few minutes ago, untouched, unbothered. When you get to the end of a section you just picked up, make sure to sort of turn the work so you always have some of the picked up stitches visible, because in these turns it is very easy to accidentally start a row over or under where you actually need to be. So fiddle around with your fabric and make sure that you know where you are. Do a Mufasa. Remember who you are, or in this case, where you are. This sort of fiddling is like the printer at work, where you can't let it know you're in a hurry because they can smell fear. This is exactly like that. So take your time, make sure you're not jittery from coffee, make sure you're not sleep deprived when attempting sweater surgery, because that will only end in tears and maybe tears. And would you look at that, I actually ended up on the same row where I began. So I have now placed I've now picked up the stitches for my first lifeline. I am now going to take my nifty little cable, place the tip on top of my needle, and with this cable on my needles, I am now slowly going to pull my stitches onto that cable. So slowly convincing the stitches to go onto that cable instead. There is a little bit of a snag where the tube starts, but gently coaxing the stitches over, and by the virtue of the needles being smaller, it's not too difficult for the stitches to then pop over that little hurdle. And you can see I'm actually now just tugging on the needle, and this thing is not coming loose unless I pull quite hard at it. So that is my first lifeline placed. And all of the stitch legs are sitting in the same direction diagonally, which tells me that I've picked them up in the right leg. the right and the right hand side of the leg. So now I'm going to count down 32 rows because that's how many rows I know that I need to take away. And I'm going to place another lifeline just like I just did right there. So I'm finding this first stitch, the corresponding column, counting down 32 rows, and that's where I start picking up for my second lifeline. Now that I have placed both of my lifelines, it is time to start cutting. This is terrifying, but I have to trust in my lifeline. So this is my first loop that is caught, it's safe, and therefore I can cut the stitch beneath and start unraveling. And see, this is where the magic comes in, because this is normally where you would lose your absolute marbles, because your stitches are running and the thread is loose. But the magic of the lifeline is that these stitches are secure. So even though this is broken, this yarn is broken, and the stitches are coming undone, they can't run up into the colour work and mess that up, because all of the stitches above are secure. So I'm going to do this for approximately 100 times more, unpick all of these stitches, and then we'll start unraveling down to the next lifeline. As we are now on the last few stitches of this round, the yarn is looking a bit worse for wear after being pulled through so many loops for such a long time. It has created quite a lot of friction and the yarn is quite frizzy. But if I wanted to, I could have just cut it off and be done with it before I had this much of a length, but it actually serves a purpose for me because I want to know how much yarn I need for my Kitchener stitch. So doing all of that showed me that I need this much yarn for the entire round, and if this yarn hadn't been so much worse for wear, you can see some of it is just absolutely falling apart and it's very frizzy looking. I could have used this for my Kitchener stitch and just kept it attached at the top, but that wouldn't have been enough to weave in the end, because remember I took out the exact amount of one row. So I will cut this and discard it, or I will leave it temporarily to the side to estimate how much yarn I need for my Kitchener stitch portion later on. But now we are left with a sleeve that is looking quite floppy, and this is where the blocking comes in as well to help you, because the stitches are very neatly formed. None of them have really run because the stitches were relaxed into each other. Now comes a satisfying and or sad portion, and that is unraveling. And the first row is going to be quite messy as well, because these stitches were felted by that string, just like the stitches on the top, but with a little stretch to break that felting, you can usually get it to go quite smoothly after a little while. And this is just for the first row, because the rows underneath haven't been felted by all of that friction. They have just been worked together with blocking. So that's going to be a more comfortable unravel. Yes, see, now it just runs like a train. Not a Swedish one though, maybe a German one. A train that is always on time, a Japanese one. And some people are very careful with their yarn and having these forbidden ramen noodles relaxed and taken care of. And that is a good idea. To relax your yarn, you can wind it into a hank and then relax that with some steam, or even chuck it into a bath and let it relax like that. Winding up a ball like this is quite strenuous on the yarn. It's going to stretch it and it's going to lose some of the natural elasticity that it has. But I am planning on using this yarn fairly soon. Famous last words. To use for a different project, and therefore I'm not too bothered by ruining the elasticity. And this is also something you could do with a ball winder, but I don't have one. I don't feel like I need any more knitting paraphernalia in my life. We're now coming up to the last few rows of my knitting before the lifeline, and we're about to see if I picked up all of the stitches in the right row, because if not, part of this is going to start snagging because I've picked up stitches from the wrong row, and I will still have some portions left of stitches that haven't been unravelled yet that should be. But look at that, it looks like I actually managed to get the right row for all of these stitches. So this is how it looks, perfectly fine. And I also know exactly where the start of the round is. And neatly enough, that is in the same position as the beginning of round at the top of this sleeve. So when I go to join these two together, I know where to start and where to finish, because I made my life a little bit easier a few minutes ago. Who am I kidding? An hour ago. So I have two rows that I want to connect. I'm going to connect it with this middle one. This is going to pretend to be a knit stitch. It's going to be an imposter, and this imposter tries to hug everyone it sees. So if we talk about V's and U's, so this is the V and this is the U. The yarn is going to go from behind into the V, come up and point out here. It's going to go up to the next row that we want to connect. It's going to go behind both of the legs of the V and hug them, come out to the front, go down and go underneath the U, the legs of the U. Here it pokes out again, going on the outside into the next valley and going behind the next V, hugging both of the legs, going out, and here going in, going behind, hugging both of the legs of the U, coming out, up here, going behind and hugging both of the legs of the V. So a lot of hugs, and you can tell that I am a graphic designer by trade. No, but this is how I could make it most obvious. And of course, I will sign my name on this masterpiece. It will be available on my Etsy for 100,000 euros. Thank you. For the next portion of this work, I am going to be on my sofa, because honestly, this is going to take absolute ages, and I want the Winter Olympics on in the background while I do it. So, since I have the beginning of the round right here at the beginning of my cable, and I have the beginning of round right here at the beginning of this cable, I know where to start, and I hopefully know where to stop. For some reason, the video on demand service, the Swedish broadcasting service, didn't allow me to watch the Winter Olympics. So I actually watched Isabella from Breathing Yarn instead, which was lovely. She has the best content. And then, if I had listened to my mic, I would have noticed that my battery was cutting out. But here I am anyway, talking you through, not that you can hear, but talking you through how to do the Kitchener stitch again. So you see me now finishing that stitch by going in from the front and then into the next from the back, pulling through and pulling a bit tighter but not too tight because the cable is still attached, so that does take up some space in the stitches above. So not too tight. And then going up into the row above the cable and going in from the front, hugging both of the legs from the back and pulling tight. Honestly, just look it up. You'll be so much better off just looking it up. Fair warning though, it takes ages. Doing that sleeve took me 65 minutes. And here we are. I have now finished all of these stitches. They're looking quite crumpled because this cable is in the way. And I'm now going to wrangle this cable out by force. Maybe not that much force. So there we have it. First sleeve, second sleeve. Finished and perfect, looking great. Look at me just guessing what I'm saying. I'm saying such important things. The stitches ended up being a little looser than the stockinette stitch above and below. That doesn't really surprise me, nor does it bother me. I did block it after filming this, and they evened out quite a lot. I wanted to finish this project because it had been initially planned as a Christmas present for my partner. That is too late now, but I sewed the armpits, the armholes, the sleeves together, and this is the finished result. If you found this video helpful or enjoyable to watch or entertaining, please like and subscribe. I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you for watching and take care of yourself. Bye.